NTFS is a relatively newer file system beginning with Windows NT and 2000, and it has brought in a lot of new features, including better metadata support and advanced data structures. Some of the added features to NTFS are larger file size, large volume size, last access time for files, data structure, and organization efficiency, which are all important in the forensic world. Now, FAT systems were originally used in DOS and Windows versions prior to Windows XP. The 32 in the FAT refers to the 32-bit numbers that represent the cluster values, which means that the table entry can have a minimum of 2 to the 32 power in values. So even though that the FAT operating system is not utilized in many of the newer hard drives, it is still often used as a default file system in removable media and storage devices, and as well as multiple computer operating systems. FAT is also good for these types of media because it is very ubiquitous and versatile system in files, So FAT can also be joined with random operating systems, which is why the file system is simplistic when comparing to NTFS. Now, the data structures in a file systems are important because it organizes and sorts all the files and their data in a certain way to create an efficient system. There are a number of different types of data structures, and each structure is typically utilized for a specific file system. Now, NTFS structure starts in the first sector with 512 byte record known as the boot record. Now, this record has boot codes, disk signatures, and which that maintains and identifies the partition and the table of primary partitions. It becomes important in file systems forensic to be able to identify the correct partition and the types of partition. Now, one major difference between NTFS and FAT data structure is that NTFS utilizes a journaling file system. Now, a journaling file system keeps track of changes in a file system used by a journal. So this allows for a quicker reboot if a system crashes or power failure, and it also protects files from being corrupted. So that's very important in the forensic world. Now, the NTFS log records any changes in the volume due to metadata. So the component is that the center of the NTFS file is the master file table, or referred to as MFT. Now, MFT keeps data record to itself, so NTFS reserves the first 16 records of the MFT data files. The key thing to remember with NTFS is that every entry is a file. So that's very important. Now, the FAT file system is very simple in comparison to NTFS. The FAT file system has two main data structures, a file allocation table, or FAT, and directory entries. Now, every file and directory is allocated in a data structure, specifically a directory entry. These directory entries are stored in clusters, and if more than one cluster is used, then the FAT data structure is located, is used to locate the individual entries. Now, the FAT table will identify the next cluster in a file because the NTFS structure, the NTFS organizational structure helps make locating data in a file system easy and straightforward. The useful information can be extracted from the MFT metadata files, including where to locate certain attributes and possibly hidden spaces such as slack space. But in order to understand where the data can be hidden, one must first understand the structure. The FAT file system is significantly less complicated, and it relies mainly on FAT table to locate the data. So that should help out a lot. Now, it can be possibly more complicated to extract data from FAT table, but the final result will typically yield the same as NTFS. Now, when considering the FAT32 file system, it has many good qualities in areas other than strong areas of NTFS. These qualities are things as versatility and compatibility. FAT32 has very little security, and if one has access to the file, if one has access to the drive, then they can access any file folder there. Now, FAT32 is much more susceptible to disk errors and do not recover as readily as the NTFS. FAT32 does not support file compression, which helps greatly with organizations. And since NTFS allows smaller cluster files than FAT32, it wastes less disk space and has less potential for hidden files. However, again, FAT32 has its uses, okay? And it is compared with any Windows operating system, Apple, HFS, and file system, and many NIC file systems can be converted to NTFS without reformatting. Now, if NTFS were to be converted to FAT32 for some reason, the NTFS would have to be formatted. NTFS was designed to be a robust file system with its added features such as data streams, hierarchical storage, file compression, and encryption. Plus, a very high performance level MTFS has proved to be a very capable system. However, if the Windows system earlier than Windows NT is used, NTFS may not be compatible with it. And this also may affect some software programs that may not be able to function with NTFS. And so, some permissions are allowed in NTFS to control the file and folder access, but it also puts a chance for errors in the system's way up.